to the Colorblind Architect Podcast. I'm your host, David Clayton, and this is my car. Okay. Uh, no, I'm sitting in my car because when I started my vlog, my podcast, I realized I needed a nice, quiet place to produce this. And I realized that with 5 kids in the house, um, there's really no place to do it. I could try to do it at the office, but that's also not good because then you have coworkers and it's just awkward. So the car's a great place to do it. So then you might be wondering, why do a podcast? Why? I mean, there's already so many podcasts out there. There's so many people already doing this kind of thing. Am I doing it to be like everybody else? No, I really could care less what everybody else is doing. More, the reason why I'm producing this is I want to be able to have a place where I can share my thoughts and feelings and get it off my chest. There's a lot of times when people, um, when you're talking with people, it's kind of hard to just unload all the things that you're thinking about when you talk with just other people, coworkers or colleagues, random people on the street. You don't just walk up to them and go, "Hey, what about this? What about this issue?" No, you start by talking about the damn weather, right? I mean, it's kind of funny because that's actually one of the things that I was going to talk about in this episode. This, my first episode of the Colorblind Architect Podcast, is how orange the sky is and has been for the last few weeks. We've been having a lot of wildfires out here in the western United States. Mostly California is on fire. And even though I'm 800 miles away from California, here in Utah, we are getting a lot of ash and smoke from California just coming into our land, into our air. We're breathing it. It's a horrible environmental disaster. And one might ask, why is it happening? And here's where I kind of break the news to any blue pill takers. I'm going to say it that way. I don't like the Democrats. See, the Democrats, the leftists, the Marxists, they've all been trying to say that these wildfires are caused by global warming. Now, I wasn't born yesterday. I'm not a freaking idiot. See, here's the thing. Global warming, that's a big issue. And a lot of people have been penalized. They've been punished for trying to say that global warming is fake. Even if they weren't trying to say it was fake. The left, the mainstream media and all kinds of other organizations that have a vested interest in keeping this climate change argument in place, they try to destroy anybody who would criticize the narrative. The narrative that global warming's causing all these disasters. Now, here's the question I'm going to ask. Look at history and look at when winemaking was actually a very profitable business in England instead of France. You're probably thinking, Dave, you're an idiot. It's probably because you're some stupid Mormon who's never drinking alcohol. Okay. First off, that has nothing to do with it. The history is that in the late Middle Ages, from about 1000 AD to about 1300 AD, you actually had a winemaking industry in England. Because guess what? Global temperatures during that 300-year period were actually warmer than they were today. Now, then we went into what was called the Little Ice Age. From about 1300 AD all the way through about 1850, we were in what was called the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age global temperatures plummeted and it got a lot colder. And the winemaking industry in England collapsed. Now, they might be coming back now that things are getting warmer. Great, wonderful. But the point is that this isn't the first time that global temperatures have risen or fallen. Now, why do I bring this up? Because you've got Gavin Newsom, governor of California, constantly talking about how it's all global warming, it's global warming, it's global warming. And yet, there have been so many arrests of arsons. There's also, it's statistically known, it's been reported, it's clear. Most of these fires have been created by man-made sources. Now, a lot of times these are accidents. I live in a very dry state, the second driest state in the country. I mean, Nevada's the only place drier than Utah. So when you go out into the woods, which I love going out into the woods, I love camping, I love hiking, it's something that I really enjoy. So when I do that, I have to be really careful. I have to make sure that I'm not going to spark a wildfire. So, for example, if you're towing something, you typically have the safety chains hooked up to the back of your car, and as those drag, if they're too loose and they're dragging across the stones as you're going on a gravel road, guess what that can do? That can create sparks. Those sparks can ignite a wildfire. So yes, it's very easy to create wildfires. On the flip side, it's also true that there's arsons out there. There's people who actually intentionally set fires because they're trying to create panic. They're trying to create tension and drama. They have a political agenda, some of them. And some of them are just freaking crazy. So, what do you do about it? Well, there's a lot of things. This year, 2020, quite frankly, has made me so angry. This year started kind of crazy, you know, right? We had World War III, at least according to the memes. Anybody remember that? That was like the first couple days of 2020 where we thought we were going to war with Iran, and then it ended pretty fast. Yeah, that was kind of nice. I wish that could have been the end of it. Then a lot of people might have forgotten this. This was so long ago, all the way back in January of this year. Do you remember that Donald Trump was impeached? And we had the Senate hearings to talk about that? And wow, that was this year. It feels like it was like 5 years ago, right? So fast forward, you get the pandemic. I mean, here I am having a great ski season here in Utah. I mean, I love going skiing. It's a wonderful sport. Way too expensive, but you know, it is a really, really fun sport. It's something that I love doing. That's actually why I live here in Utah. And all of a sudden, middle of March, all my ski resorts just suddenly shut down. They closed up. And I was pissed. And I'm thinking, why are you doing this? This is for a respiratory illness, a respiratory virus that doesn't get spread by being outdoors far away from a lot of other people. And yet I had to quit my ski season early. Normally ski season here in Utah goes until about the end of April, and if you're going to Snowbird, it stays open sometimes all the way to July 4th, usually just through the end of May. But regardless, that's the typical ski season. And here we are, all of a sudden shutting down because everybody's scared of a virus. Now, that virus, yes, it's killed a lot of people. It's been a very frightening thing for a lot of people. So we get this lockdown, 15 days to slow the flow, and we're still dealing with lockdowns 7 months later. It is now almost October. We're still dealing with these stupid lockdowns. Businesses have been destroyed. People's jobs have been lost. Many people have committed suicide because of this pandemic. Not because of the actual pandemic, but because of the government response to it. Now, I might sound a little bit angry, a little bit worked up. And a large part of that is because this very morning, I find out that my Republican governor, Governor Gary Herbert, is extending the state of emergency again. And he's talking about new restrictions, new lockdowns, because there's been a sudden spike in the numbers. All the while, we've got our forests burning down. We've got our cities under siege because of rioters. We've got freaking race riots going on in this country. And you've got the left making a full-scale march into cultural Marxism, cultural revolution, Mao Zedong-style cultural revolutions. And you expect me to stay quiet? You expect me to just keep living my life quietly and just accept this crap? I say no. I'm going to stand. I'm going to speak out. That's the purpose of this vlog, this podcast. It's so that I can make my voice heard. Even if nobody ever listens to this, even if it's just me talking into the wind, I still need to make my voice heard and make sure that I'm counted among those who fought against the Marxists. And yeah, I know. My own Republican governor, Gary Herbert, is going along with this stuff, with the lockdowns, the incessant lockdowns. Now, granted, Utah is a lot freer than California is. The lockdowns haven't been nearly as severe. The mask mandates have been, by city. So obviously, I do not go to certain places like Provo, Utah, because Provo, Utah actually has a mask mandate where they can actually fine you. Now, my problem with Gary Herbert is what he's done is he keeps extending this state of emergency. Now, the state law says that the governor can enact a state of emergency unilaterally up to 30 days. Now, past 30 days, he's required to get the state legislature's approval. I don't remember ever hearing any news or any reports from my friends who are actually in the state legislature saying anything about going to vote for this. I don't even remember them going into the state house to vote for anything. And yet, I don't hear a peep from any of them about what's going on. I don't hear anything about them calling into question the illegality of Governor Herbert's actions. Because everybody's acting like, oh, but it's an emergency, it's a pandemic, we need to be careful. And my thought is, I don't give a crap if it's a pandemic or there is a comet striking our state right now at this moment. We have a law for a reason. And by the way, the comet striking us isn't going to last more than 30 days, okay? We had a freaking hurricane force windstorm just a couple weeks ago here in this state. It knocked out power to 200,000 homes, made all of our lives a living hell, and here we are. Now that was an emergency. Did he call a state of emergency for that? No. But for a pandemic, which has been ongoing for 7 months and hasn't been a crisis on our hospital system, that keeps going. And he keeps renewing that state of emergency every 30 days. Supposedly so that it stays legal. But again, I have not seen a vote of the legislature to approve it. So why do I keep talking about that? Well, that's one of the big things that I'm really frustrated about, is that we've got politicians on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, that are just taking more and more power for themselves. All the while, we're the ones suffering. Just average people. I've got friends whose businesses have been completely destroyed. I've got clients whose businesses have been destroyed. And the projects that I was working on for them had to be canceled because their businesses were destroyed by this lockdown. Now, is the pandemic real? Yes, it is. But here's the thing about a pandemic. You can self-quarantine. You can also make sure that the people who are most at risk actually quarantine themselves. But ultimately, our lives are not meant to be lived in slavery. We are free individuals. The government is there to protect our common interests. Read the Constitution. It's really simple. The government has very limited powers, and yet the government takes more powers than they deserve. And that is something that is unacceptable. So, here I am, alone in my car, talking into the wind. Maybe some of you are listening. Maybe just maybe I can join to the chorus of voices shouting out for freedom, shouting out for personal liberty, shouting out for what's right against what is wrong. And granted, I get it. Everybody has different views on what that might be. Now, just a little housekeeping, so I've called this the Colorblind Architect Podcast. Now, just to be clear, I am actually a licensed architect, so I am legally allowed to say architect with my title. Now, why do I make that point? Just real quick, because I do know that a few years ago there was a politician in Colorado. He was not yet a licensed architect. He was actually what we refer to as an intern architect or an architect in training. So he had the degree, he was working in the field, but he was not yet licensed. He had not sat for those final tests and paid the licensing fee, so technically he was not an architect by law. And as a result, he actually got brought up in charges because he actually referred to himself as an architect in his political ads, which is actually a misdemeanor in most states to refer to yourself as an architect. Just like it would be a misdemeanor if you call yourself a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant without actually having the proper license. So I put that out there at the beginning just to be clear. I am actually licensed in 2 states and possibly soon to be a 3rd or 4th state, depending on how different projects go forward. So the next thing I want to clear up, I am actually colorblind. This is not just a reference to racial colorblindness, um, even though I am making that pun as well. But my particular type of colorblindness makes it difficult for me to distinguish certain colors. For example, pinks and grays look identical. Blues and grays sometimes look identical. Reds and greens get confused. I can generally see color, but it's different colors than what most people see. My specific type of color blindness that I have is, maybe 3% of the population has my particular type of color blindness. Now, I bring that up because I mentioned race riots earlier, and that is an issue. We have a serious issue with race in our country, but I don't think it's as the left has been portraying it. The left has been portraying this being a systematically racist country, and I wholeheartedly disagree. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our history does have a lot of really horrible things in it, such as slavery, such as our treatment of Native Americans. However, to say that we are still systematically racist in the year 2020 does not make sense, considering how deeply embedded anti-discrimination laws are in this country. Now, I will admit there are some instances of systematic racism, such as in the university systems, where affirmative action artificially boosts the entrance likelihood of blacks and Latinos just simply to increase their numbers. And this isn't to say that that's bad per se. What I bring up is that is a form of systemic racism when you talk about affirmative action, because it is actually viewing somebody by the color of their skin to determine whether or not they should be able to get into college. And I personally disagree with that. I'm going to tell a funny story. And I think enough time's gone by that I think it's safe to share this. But all the way back when I went to grad school, I applied to Virginia Tech, and at the time, Virginia Tech actually had like most universities on the application, when you fill it out, it had the line for race. Well, it lists a bunch of different races, and it has black, or in parentheses African American, and a bunch of others. Well, what was interesting for white, they didn't actually write white, they wrote Caucasian. And so first off, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not Caucasian. My ancestry goes back to the British Isles, not the Caucasus region in, Azerbaijan, Georgia, that area of the Caucasus Mountains in between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. That's where Caucasians live, because they're in the Caucasus Mountains. I am not from the Caucasus region. I am from America. I was born in America. I was raised in America. And my ancestors settled here in the 1600s. Not a single one of my ancestors came to this country after the 1600s. They all came here in the 1600s. How do I know that? Because my dad's done the family history. And so, am I supposed to say that I'm British? Am I supposed to say that I'm Caucasian? Am I supposed to say that I'm anything but American? When for 400 years my family's been here? Now, this isn't to say that I'm better than anyone else. I'm not bringing that up to try to lift myself up. After all, I am married to a Romanian. She grew up in Romania, came here to America. We met at college, and we got married. And she is now an American citizen. She is just as much American as I am. And that's one of the great beauties of this country, is that you don't have to be natively born here. So, going back to the question on race, I'm filling that application out. And what was I supposed to put? I actually left it blank because that was actually one of the options. Thankfully, I left it blank because that was my silent protest that I felt that race had nothing to do with whether or not I should get into Virginia Tech. I felt that if you're going to judge me by the content of my character, by the quality of my grades, by the quality of my test scores, okay? Judge me by those factors. Don't judge me by the color of my skin. Because, look, if I am white and you are systematically racist and you're promoting white people, then why on earth would I, as a self-respecting person, want to subject myself to feeling like, oh, I got in because I was white? Same thing for black people. Why would you want to get into Harvard or any other institution, always having in the back of your mind, oh, well, I got in because I was black, because of the color of my skin? This is why it bothers me so much, is because I was born this way. I didn't choose to be born to the family I was born to. I love my family. I have a wonderful family. But I didn't choose that. I'm grateful for it. But I didn't choose it. I didn't choose being white. I didn't choose to not be an Olympic marathon runner. Because, frankly, I'm not that fast of a runner. But, you know what? That's okay. Because I was born that way. I accept that I was born the way I was. I accept the fact that there are certain limitations placed upon me because of my genetics. But I don't want that to be something that stops me from being able to do things that I want to do. Now, there's some things, like, for example, running a marathon under 4 hours. Probably not ever going to happen for me. My fastest marathon time was 4 hours and 22 minutes. And if you're familiar with marathon running, that's basically about a 10-minute mile pace. And I don't think it's ever going to get too much better than that. Not that I don't try. It's just I'm only getting older, and it's something that I'm okay with. You know, it's okay. I'm just thrilled that I was able to run it even at all. I'm like, just like my skiing. I'm not gonna be an Olympic skier. I'm not gonna be one of these guys jumping off cliffs in a video. But you know what? I'm okay with that. So, why does that matter? Because a lot of this talk and a lot of this stuff that's been going on in our country with anti-racism or white fragility, these different buzzwords that have been going around lately, those are BS. They're total BS. Because ultimately, yeah, sure, you're dealt the hand that you're given when you're born. Okay? And I get it. There's a lot of black people who are born in very impoverished circumstances in America. Granted, they're the wealthiest black people on earth if they're born here in the United States, even if they're the poorest of the black people in America. But they do still have, on a statistical basis, a lower starting point on average than the average white person. Now, is it to say that there's not tons of white people poorer than that black person? Yeah, exactly. Because that's how averages work. Averages don't mean that every person who is black is poor and every person who's white is rich. My dad grew up in a freaking mobile home. Okay? My mom, she grew up in a house where, although her parents, you know, they did okay, but they had to work their tails off. Both of them working in the 1950s, 1960s. Okay? They're both working as hard as they could. And my grandfather was constantly trying, you know, doing different jobs, switching jobs, because he'd work for a few years, get fired, and have to, you know, pick things back up and start all over again. Well, yeah. So was that white privilege? Was that somehow, you know, they were just mediocre in their well-being their whole entire life? They never rose to any kind of wealth? I mean, when my mom's parents passed away, they were living in my aunt's house. Before that, before when they were self-sufficient, they were living in a mobile home. My dad's mom, same thing. She lived in a mobile home the last 20 years of her life. At least. Possibly 30, 40 years. Is this to say anything bad about a mobile home? No, actually, it's a great housing choice for people who are very poor. Now, is it a good choice if you're in an urban area? No, actually, it's a very poor choice if you're in an urban area. In fact, anything in a big urban area is really bad for poor people, regardless of which race. I mean, are we supposed to somehow believe that black people own poverty? That they're the only ones who are poor? No, we know that's not the truth. There's a lot of Latinos that are poor. There's a lot of Asians who are poor. There's a lot of whites who are poor. But you know what? Every single one of them, if they work hard, if they're smart about it, they have a chance of climbing a little bit or a lot. Now, is there luck involved? Yeah, there's definitely luck involved. But to say that this country is systematically racist is to say that somehow a single degree temperature rise globally, on average, across the entire year, over the past 100 years, is to blame for a record-setting year of forest fires in California. It doesn't really make sense. And it's built upon a lie. So, I've been talking for a while now. And I probably should wrap this up. I mean, actually, I do have a lot of work to do. I am, fortunately, I'm gainfully employed. So, thank you for sharing this moment with me. Thank you for spending a little time listening to my little rant here, my little venting of my frustrations. Um, Hopefully, there'll be a lot more of these. Hopefully, this is something that I can share, and hopefully, somebody will find value in it. But ultimately, stay safe, stay strong, and for goodness sake, please do not stay quiet. If you see stuff that you believe is wrong, you need to speak up. This is not a time for sunshine patriots. This is not a time in our nation's history to just go along with the flow. If you think that just going along, playing nice, with this critical race theory, this Marxist ideology, this white fragility type of stuff, this anti-racism type of stuff, where they are literally trying to tell us that our country is founded upon evil. How does that not equal a requirement morally to overthrow this country and start anew? You can't say that. You can't say that this country is fundamentally and systematically evil because of our past sins, which, by the way, we already atoned for that. We already spilt 600,000 American lives in the Civil War fighting to liberate the slaves. No, we already fought that battle, and the same people who are trying to tell us that we're systematically racist were the ones who were on the side of the slaveholders. Yes, that's right. I'm calling you guys out. The Democrat Party. The Democrat Party was founded by Andrew Jackson, and by the way, I am not a fan of Donald Trump. And by the way, you thought this vlog was just about over. Ooh, yeah, you got me going now again. So, look, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, although I am planning on voting for him this fall. If only because I feel like it is my moral obligation to stop the Democrats from having any more power. The Republicans suck, Trump sucks, I get it. But they are far less of a problem than the Democrats. So let's first destroy the Democrats. Again, the Democrats, founded by Andrew Jackson, who force-marched the Cherokees, who were a peaceful Christian group of Indians in North Georgia, over 1,000 miles on the Trail of Tears out to Oklahoma, supposedly gave them that land, but they did it because, why? Andrew Jackson had a land deal. He wanted what's now Atlanta for him and his friends. They were going to build out this wonderful stuff and make a lot of money. But they had to get the Cherokees out of there because it was such valuable land. They needed the Cherokees out. That was strike number one. All right? Then, of course, they defended slavery tooth and nail. Once the Republicans won the Civil War and abolished slavery, what do the Democrats do? They start up the Ku Klux Klan. And they start instituting Jim Crow laws. It was the Democrats who erected the Confederate statues in the 19-teens under Democrat Woodrow Wilson. And then, everybody always talks about the Southern strategy and the shift in the 60s and 70s for the Republicans. As, again, the Democrats are lying. They've been lying since they were founded. They're lying again about that. The Republicans were not, they were going after the Southerners who had already seen the light, that racism was bad, that Jim Crow was bad. The Republicans weren't trying to gain, oh yeah, you know what? Man, we can get a bunch of these racist Ku Klux Klan voters if we just, talk about low taxes and states' rights. No, it doesn't work that way. No, low taxes does not mean racist. States' rights does not mean racist, even though the Democrats tried to use the argument of states' rights to defend slavery for such a long time. So, no, the Republicans did not go after Southern whites with the intent to get a bunch of racists on board. Okay? And if anything, look at who the people are who are turning their backs on Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. What did Martin Luther King Jr. say? He said, I have a dream that my children will be able to grow up, and I'm paraphrasing, where they'll be judged on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And yet we're being told by these anti-racists, right? We're being told by these anti-racist and these Marxists of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, we're being told that we need to see race and that we need to see that whites are racist. Okay, wait. You're referring to me as a white person. You're referring to black people as black people instead of as individuals. Okay. This is where I have a big time issue and why I did not answer the question to race on my college application, because I will not accept race as an identifier, because that's immoral. Why? Because it doesn't freaking matter what your skin color is. It doesn't freaking matter what your life history is or your family history. You should be judged on the content of your character. So what is the content of your character then? The content of your character is your behavior, how you act, how you treat others. What are you doing with your life? Regardless of your starting point, what are you doing with it? If you are being a good person, then that has more merit than anything to do with your race, your gender, your ethnicity, your religion, your sexual orientation. None of that stuff matters when it comes down to the content of your character. And that's what I thought we were all on the same page with. I thought we were all together on that. But here we are now in the year 2020, and we've got a bunch of Marxists in the guise of an organization so named so as to make it impossible for you to fight against them. Black Lives Matter, a Marxist organization that has as on their website a stated goal to disrupt the nuclear family. To disrupt the nuclear family, which, by the way, if you read the Communist Manifesto, it says the same damn thing. Except that it says to abolish the family. Yes, it's a little bit different, but it's the same precept. It's saying that instead of having a family, as we've always had families throughout the history of mankind, We have always had a mother, a father, and their children. Okay? Now, you might argue, oh, but polygamy? Okay, yeah, I live in Utah, so that's a fair point. I know personally, my family's never engaged in polygamy. Um, I'm not going to comment on that necessarily because personally, I don't condone polygamy. Now, for those who do practice it in a respectful manner, so long as they're not harming anybody, and so long as the 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 brides that are involved are all of legal consent age, at least 18 years of age, it's kind of hard to argue against it when you say, oh yes, but a man and a man should be able to get married. Well, if you're going to say that, then you have to say that polygamy is legal too, because what's wrong with a man and a woman and a woman and a woman getting married? Why do you have to be so bigoted against polygamists? You're trying to say that only bigamy is allowed? Sounds pretty bigoted to me. Unless we recognize that there is a traditional nuclear family. That traditional nuclear family of one man, one woman, and their children. And I don't want this to devolve into a bunch of comments about traditional marriage versus gay marriage. That's not why I brought that up. It was more to point out the fact that if you read the Black Lives Matter website, it has way more on their beliefs, their agenda about transgenders and transsexuals and gays and lesbians than it has about blacks. And most notably, like I said, that statement to disrupt the nuclear family. Why? Why would you want to destroy something that gives children the best chance for success? And this isn't even an opinion. This is actually a statistical fact. If you actually study the statistics of families and children who grow up in a good two-parent family, and I say good as in like it was a functional family, right? They are the most likely statistically to succeed. Who's the most dysfunctional? Well, you're most likely to be a dysfunctional adult if you grew up in a broken family compared to a family that's solid. So, why does that matter? Well, because Black Lives Matter, of all the things they should be fighting for, I mean, not once on there are they talking about ending systematic racism. They're just saying that America is systematically racist and that we need to destroy the family. Okay. Well, why? Well, it's because they're Marxist. Read the Communist Manifesto. It's not that long of a document. Read it. See if you agree with it. Because personally, when I read it, I get so enraged. I mean, it makes me so mad because so much lies. But that's what the Marxists do. The left lies about everything. Because you got to remember, they think God is a fairy tale. They think that civility and traditional families are of the bourgeois. The bourgeois. Yeah. The bourgeois. What? What even is the bourgeois? No, and I seriously want to ask this. I seriously want to ask these Marxists, do you even know what the bourgeois is? Probably not. It's a French word that refers to townsfolk. The English form of it is burgess. Now, what's special about burgess? Well, being that I grew up in Virginia, I am quite familiar with the history of Virginia's colonial General Assembly. Now, very few people realize this, but the Virginia General Assembly is actually the longest standing legislature on the planet. It has actually been meeting in regular session since the early 1600s. Now, before they had the current bicameral legislature known as the House of Delegates and the Senate, they had, in the colonial era, the House of Burgesses. The House of Burgesses. What might that mean? Well, it was referring to the Commons. In England, they call it the House of Commons. Yes, it's the common folk. In other words, the people who don't necessarily have a bunch of landed wealth. They're just average people, but they've managed to gain just enough so that they could buy a little piece of land, or buy a shop, or own a shop. Maybe they didn't even start out owning a shop. Maybe they just started out as a tenant. But they're a townsfolk or a small landowner. Lords, on the other hand, refers to the people who were the landed elite. Now, in this country, we had no landed elite. So we don't have a House of Lords in this country. England had a House of Lords. Am I digressing? Maybe. Here's the point. The Marxists try to claim that the bourgeois or the burgesses are the evil ones. And they proclaim the proletariat to be the heroes in the story. Now, here's the question for you. Who the hell are the proletariat? Well, in America, I would argue that the proletariat does not exist. We do not have a proletariat. First off, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that proletariat was a word invented by Karl Marx. I'm not sure it actually ever existed anywhere before then. But the other factor is, Karl Marx was a horrible anti-Semite and a racist. Interesting coincidence, right? Interesting coincidence that the Black Lives Matter and Antifa groups who are telling us all that we're systematically racist and that we whites we have white privilege and that we're racist because we're born white. And they're Marxist, right? Interesting coincidence that Karl Marx himself was a horrible racist. He was such a horrible racist that his own son-in-law, yes, his daughter, marries a Cuban immigrant to England. And he would frequently refer to him as an N-word dog. Okay. I'm not even sure, because the description in the history books just say that he was Cuban. It didn't say whether he was black Cuban or Hispanic Cuban or white Cuban. Because, by the way, Cuba is a pretty diverse place. There's a lot of different races in Cuba. Which, by the way, shouldn't matter. they're all Cubans, right? Because they hail from Cuba. That's how we distinguish them, is because they're from Cuba. Not that, oh, he's a white Cuban, or he's a black Cuban, or he's a Hispanic. Who the freak cares? Well, Karl Marx did. He cared a whole lot. And he, by the way, Karl Marx, he was a raving anti-Semite. He hated Jews. And he blamed Jews for the bourgeois. Okay. Well, noodle me this. Karl Marx was a Jew. I mean, his dad was Jewish and converted to Protestantism in order to hide the fact that he was Jewish so that he could function okay in a German society that was already somewhat anti-Semitic. So, here's Karl Marx. He hates Jews, and yet ethnically he's Jewish. Doesn't make sense. And yet we're supposed to believe the raving rantings of a racist white man from Germany from well over 170 years ago. We're supposed to listen to him over Thomas Jefferson, a white man who, while a slaveholder, also wrote the document that eventually spelled the demise of slavery, the Declaration of Independence. True, it did not ban it at that time, but it clearly says in there that slavery was an evil instituted by the Crown of England, right? But no. Yeah, we're supposed to accept our racial theories from Karl Marx, a man who believed that blacks and Hispanics were dogs. We're supposed to believe him over Thomas Jefferson, who wrote that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights, and among those being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'm gonna stand with my boy Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, he was a flawed man, just like Donald Trump is a flawed man. But you know what? At least Donald Trump right now is standing up for the principles that founded this country. And those principles that created the greatest, most wealthy, and most equitable society that this planet has ever seen. And yeah, I'll definitely take Thomas Jefferson's vision over Karl Marx's vision any day. I'm the Colorblind Architect. Peace out.